Elijah Monroe was 47 years old, sat at a mahogany desk worth more than the house he grew up in, and could not remember the last time his wife had looked at him like she actually saw him. Not glanced, not acknowledged. Looked. The kind of look she used to give him across the kitchen table in their first apartment on Dowling Street, back when they split groceries and counted quarters for laundry and thought they had everything they would ever need. Now they had a 6-bedroom house in River Oaks, 2 German cars in a 3-car garage, and the kind of silence between them that sounds exactly like a marriage dying in slow motion. He built Monroe & Associates General Contracting from a pickup truck and a borrowed toolbox. Grew up in 3rd Ward, Houston. Shared a bedroom with 2 brothers until he was 16. Watched his mother press uniforms for other people's children at a private school she could never afford to send her own kids to. When he graduated from Prairie View A&M, his mother handed him an envelope with $400 inside. Every dollar she had saved over 11 years of pressing those uniforms. He built his first crew with that money. 14 years later, the company was pulling $22 million in annual revenue, and Elijah Monroe's name was on the side of cranes across downtown Houston. But the house in River Oaks was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with square footage. On a Thursday evening in late October, Elijah sat in the parking lot of his accountant's office on Westheimer Road for 40 minutes after the meeting ended. Engine off, windows up. Watching the sky go orange over the freeway overpass. His accountant had just told him the company was in its strongest financial position in 5 years. Record quarter, cash reserves at an all-time high. He should have felt something. He felt nothing. That was the night he called Dr. Yvonne Price. Yvonne was a behavioral psychologist he had known since their undergraduate days at Prairie View. Sharp, careful, the kind of woman who listened to what you were not saying more closely than what you were. She had built a practice in Montrose that specialized in high-net-worth individuals and the particular loneliness that nobody believes exists until it is sitting on their chest at 2 in the morning. He told her the truth, plainly, without dressing it up. I do not know who in my life loves me and who loves what I provide. I have not known for a long time, and it is eating me alive. She was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking about doing, Elijah? I want to tell everyone the company went bankrupt, that we lost everything. I want to see who stays. Before we get into what happened next, settle in, get comfortable. Because this story is going to take you through something real before it brings you back. Yvonne did not try to talk him out of it. She had seen enough men like Elijah, men who had replaced connection with achievement so gradually they did not notice the trade until the silence became unbearable. To understand this was not impulse. This was a man who had been building toward this question for years and had finally found the courage to ask it. They spent 2 weeks constructing the scenario. A fabricated bankruptcy filing, a convincing paper trail showing the company had overextended on a federal contract and been caught in a penalty clause that wiped out every asset. Yvonne brought in a colleague, a financial therapist who specialized in family systems under economic stress, to help design what they called a controlled financial collapse. On a Sunday evening in November, Elijah sat his family down in the living room and told them he had lost everything. What Elijah was conducting is what psychologists call a resource removal test. In family systems theory, the provider often functions as an economic anchor. Remove the anchor, and the system reveals which relationships were structural and which were transactional. The honesty of the response is almost always immediate. His wife, Camille, was sitting on the sectional with her legs tucked beneath her. She was 44, had taught 4th grade at Blackshear Elementary for 9 years before Elijah asked her to stop working when the company took off. She had agreed, though something in the way she agreed had always stayed with him. Not reluctant, resigned. Like a woman setting down a piece of herself she did not expect to pick back up. When he finished speaking, the room was still. His son, Tobias, 17, sat on the floor near the window with his headphones around his neck, staring at his father with the raw, unprocessed shock of a teenager hearing for the first time that the world is not as stable as he assumed. Camille looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, Elijah lied. She nodded once, not the nod of a woman who is processing, the nod of a woman who has already decided what she is going to do. "Okay," she said. "What do we need to do first?" She did not cry. She did not ask about the house. She did not mention the cars, or the accounts, or the life they had built around numbers. She asked what needed to be done, as if the money had always been furniture in a room, and the room itself was what mattered. Tobias crossed the room and sat next to his mother. He took her hand. He did not say anything, but his jaw was set in that particular way young men hold their faces when they are trying very hard not to be afraid. Elijah watched them, his wife and his son, sitting together on a couch in a house he had just told them they were about to lose, holding hands in the lamplight like two people who had already silently agreed to protect each other. He almost ended it right there, almost told them the truth. But he needed to see the rest, because the people who worried him most had not yet arrived. Word spread the way it always does. Somebody told somebody who mentioned it to somebody else, and by Tuesday morning the phone was ringing. The first call came from his brother-in-law, Victor Hollins. Victor was Camille's younger brother, 41, a real estate agent who had closed exactly 3 deals in 2 years and spent the rest of his time posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn from the backseat of an Audi that Elijah's company leased for him. Victor had a talent for arriving at family gatherings, with an energy that suggested he was doing everyone a favor by showing up. He came to the house Tuesday afternoon, let himself in through the garage like he always did, found Elijah in the study. "Man, I heard. This is devastating." He sat down without being invited. "Listen, I have been thinking. If the company is going under, there are assets that need to be moved before creditors freeze everything. Equipment, vehicles, the warehouse on Jensen Drive. I know people who can store things off the books. Keep it in the family." He leaned forward. "And listen, the house. If you put it in Camille's name now, before the filing goes through, they cannot touch it. I already talked to an attorney about it." He had already talked to an attorney about it. He had already talked to an attorney before visiting his brother-in-law, before asking if Elijah was okay, before anything resembling concern for a human being had crossed his mind. "I am looking out for you," Victor said. That is what family does. What Victor is performing is asset capture disguised as advocacy. He frames self-interest as protection, positioning himself as the responsible party while simultaneously creating a paper trail that would give him legal proximity to assets he has no claim to. This behavior is common in families where one member's financial success has been silently redefined by others as a shared resource. Victor does not see himself as predatory. He sees himself as finally being practical. The second visitor was more careful. Reggie Odom had been Elijah's closest friend since freshman year at Prairie View. They had pledged the same fraternity, stood in each other's weddings, named their sons after each other's fathers. Reggie ran a smaller contracting outfit in Pearland, and had always existed comfortably in Elijah's shadow, close enough to benefit from the association, far enough to maintain the appearance of independence. Reggie showed up Wednesday with a bottle of Hennessy and 2 cigars. He sat on the back porch with Elijah and said all the right things for 30 minutes. How the industry was unforgiving. How Elijah had built something incredible. How these things happened to the best. Then he asked, "Your client list, the hospital project, the museum renovation, the thing with the city. If you are going under, those contracts are going to get reassigned. I would rather they go to someone who will honor your works than some outfit from Dallas that does not know what you built." He held the cigar between 2 fingers. "Let me take them. I will hold them until you get back on your feet." He said, hold. He meant have. 22 years of friendship sitting on the back porch wearing a very convincing expression of solidarity. Reggie illustrates what researchers call instrumental loyalty, a relationship that mirrors genuine devotion so closely that neither person can identify the moment it became conditional. Reggie does not think he is stealing. He thinks he is being strategic. And that distinction, the ability to reframe betrayal as practicality, is what makes this form of relational corruption so difficult to confront, because the person doing it genuinely believes they are being a good friend. By Thursday, the pattern was clear. Victor called 3 times with new schemes for moving assets. Reggie sent a text with a draft proposal to transition four of Elijah's largest contracts. An aunt he had not spoken to since his father's funeral 7 years ago left a voicemail asking if the house was going to be sold and whether she could have the dining room set. Elijah sat in the study with the door closed and listened to each message, read each text, cataloged each arrival, and felt the particular exhaustion of a man who was learning that his suspicions were not paranoia. They were pattern recognition. But he also noticed something else. Something quieter. Camille had not called anyone. She had not consulted her brother. She had not mentioned the house or the cars or the accounts. She had gotten up each morning at 5:30, the same time she always did, made coffee, packed Tobias's lunch, and sat at the kitchen table reading a book or staring out the window at the oak tree in the backyard. On Wednesday afternoon, when Elijah came downstairs, she was not there. Her car was gone. She came back at 6 carrying nothing. Said she had run errands. On Thursday, the same thing. Gone at 2:01. Back at 6, no bags. No explanation. On Friday, Yvonne texted Elijah a message that stopped him mid-step on the staircase. Your wife applied for a teaching position at Kashmir Gardens Elementary. Interviewed yesterday. Accepted the job this morning. She starts Monday. Elijah sat on the third step from the bottom and stared at the screen. She had not told him. She had not made it about him. She had simply, quietly, in the space of 4 days, gone back to the life she had set down 9 years ago so that she could start earning again, so the mortgage could be paid, so their son could stay in school, so the world would not collapse around the man she was married to. Even though that man had spent the last 3 years slowly disappearing from their shared life. She did not ask for credit. She did not ask for acknowledgement. She went back to work and told no one. What Camille did is an act of autonomous sacrifice. She did not wait for instructions or permission. She assessed the situation, identified her own capacity to contribute, and acted. The significance is not just in the action itself, but in its privacy. She did not perform sacrifice. She practiced it. This distinction between sacrifice as display and sacrifice as habit is one of the most reliable indicators of genuine commitment in long-term relationships. On Saturday evening, Tobias knocked on the study door. He came in and sat in the leather chair across from Elijah's desk. The chair that was slightly too large for him, that he had been sitting in since he was 6 years old, and his feet did not touch the floor. Dad, I want to say something. Elijah nodded. Whatever we have to do, I am okay with it. If we have to move, I will transfer schools. If you need me to get a job, I will get a job. I do not care about this house. He paused, and his voice went quieter. I care about you being okay. Because you have not been okay for a long time and I did not know how to say it. Elijah's chest tightened. You stopped coming to my games last year, Tobias said. And I know you were busy. I know the company was everything. But Dad, I would rather eat ramen in an apartment with you actually there than live in this house and never see you. He looked down at his hands. So if we lost the money, maybe that is not the worst thing. Maybe we get you back. The boy stood up, crossed to his father, and put his arms around him. 17 years old and already carrying the weight of knowing something his father had refused to see. Tobias is displaying something called parentified emotional insight, the capacity of a child to accurately diagnose a family dynamic that the adults have normalized. His observation that Elijah has not been okay is not teenage drama, it is precision. Children in high-achievement households often develop this perceptiveness because they are constantly calibrating whether the parent they love is present or performing. Tobias stopped counting on presence a year ago. What he is offering now is not forgiveness. It is an invitation. That night, after Tobias went to bed, Elijah found Camille in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, packing her bag for Monday. A new lanyard with a school ID. A thermos. A planner she had bought at Target, still in the plastic wrap. He stood in the doorway watching her. She had not noticed him yet. She looked like the woman he had married, not the version who wore designer dresses to charity galas and sat silently through client dinners. The real one, The woman who taught 9-year-olds to read and came home with marker stains on her sleeves and talked about her students like they were her own. She turned and saw him. "You went back to teaching," he said. She held his gaze. "Yes. You did not tell me. You had enough to carry." She zipped the bag closed. "I was not going to let us drown, Elijah. I was just going to start swimming." He wanted to cross the room, wanted to hold her, wanted to tell her everything, but the study still held a week of recordings and evidence that he was not done processing. And somewhere in the middle of what had become the most revealing week of his life, he had begun to suspect there was one more truth he had not yet reached. He sent a message to Yvonne. "Something about Victor is not sitting right. His moves are too coordinated. Go deeper." Her reply came fast. "I already did. Call me in the morning. What I found changes everything." On Sunday morning, with the house quiet and Tobias still asleep, Elijah sat in his truck in the driveway and called Yvonne. She answered on the first ring. "Victor has been in contact with Reggie for 5 months," she said. "I pulled phone records through a colleague at the firm. They have been meeting at a bar in Midtown every other Wednesday since June." Elijah was quiet. "It gets worse. In August, Victor approached 3 of your subcontractors and told them the company was financially unstable. He told them to start routing their invoices through a holding company that he and Reggie set up in July, Monroe Contracting Solutions, LLC, registered in Reggie's name. Victor is listed as managing partner." She paused. "They had been building a parallel company using your client relationships, your subcontractor network, and your reputation. And they have been doing it while smiling at your dinner table." Elijah stared through the windshield at the oak tree in the front yard. The same oak tree Camille looked at every morning from the kitchen table. "There is one more thing," Yvonne said. "The name on the lease for their office space is Camille Hollins Monroe." His stomach dropped. Victor used her maiden name and her married name to sign the lease. She did not sign it. He forged her signature. "I confirmed it with the leasing company. The notarization is fake." He closed his eyes. He put her name on it so that if it all went sideways, she would be the one holding the liability. His own sister. What Victor and Reggie have constructed is a parasitic shadow enterprise, a business deliberately designed to siphon value from an existing operation while maintaining the appearance of independence. The use of Camille's name is particularly significant. Victor has weaponized his own sister, converting a family bond into legal insulation. This is not merely opportunism. It is predatory structuring, and it reveals something deeply corrosive about Victor's psychology. He does not view Camille as a person to protect. He views her as a resource to deploy. Elijah sat in the truck for a long time after the call ended. He thought about Victor sitting in the study, leaning forward with that manufactured urgency, talking about protecting family. He thought about Reggie on the back porch, cigar in hand, performing 22 years of friendship while a holding company with Elijah's stolen clients sat in his name 6 miles away. He thought about his wife packing a school bag at midnight without saying a word, going back to the work she loved and had given up. Not for credit, not for leverage. Because the man she had married was drowning and she had decided, alone and without permission, to swim. Then he thought about something that had happened 3 years ago. Something he had never examined closely because it had arrived during a quarter when the company was expanding and his attention was elsewhere. Which was always his excuse. His attention was always elsewhere. In 2022, the company had nearly lost its largest client, a hospital renovation in the medical center worth $4.6 million. The client had cited delays and threatened to terminate the contract. Elijah had been in meetings for weeks trying to save it. Then, suddenly, the client reversed course, renewed the contract, added to Phase 2. Elijah had assumed his project manager had worked a miracle. He had sent a bonus and moved on. He called Yvonne back. "I need you to look into the hospital contract from 2022, the medical center project. Something does not add up." She called him back in 2 hours. "Your wife met with the hospital's director of facilities 3 times in October 2022. She had taught his daughter at Blackshear years earlier. She went to him personally, showed him the project timeline, explained the delays, and asked him to give the company another chance. She let that settle. She also offered to organize a literacy program for the hospital's pediatric ward as a community partnership, free. On her own time, she spent 4 months running reading groups for sick children in exchange for a second chance on a contract her husband never knew was in danger. Elijah pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. She saved a $4.6 million contract by reading stories to children in a hospital. And she never told you, she never told anyone. $4.6 million. The contract that had funded the company's expansion into commercial projects. The contract that had made everything after it possible. Saved by a woman who read picture books to kids in hospital beds and asked for nothing. Absolutely nothing. What Camille did is what relationship researchers call invisible labor of devotion. Actions that sustain a partnership's foundation without ever surfacing into the partner's awareness. The concealment is not manipulation. It is protection. Camille understood that Elijah would have experienced her intervention as a failure on his part, an inability to save his own company, so she acted in a way that preserved both the contract and his dignity. This kind of empathic precision requires an extraordinary depth of knowledge about another person, not just knowing what they need, but knowing what they cannot yet bear to receive. Monday morning. Elijah called a family meeting. He told Camille to invite Victor. He told Yvonne to be present by phone. He called Reggie himself and said he needed help figuring out the next steps. They gathered in the living room at 10,000. Victor arrived in a new blazer. Reggie brought pastries from a bakery on Washington Avenue. Tobias sat on the staircase watching. Mama Ruth, Elijah's mother, 71 years old, sat in the armchair by the window. She had driven down from Beaumont that morning without being asked. She had a way of knowing when her son needed her that had nothing to do with phone calls and everything to do with 71 years of paying attention. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes moving slowly around the room. She did not speak. She did not need to. She had been reading rooms like this her entire life. Camille sat on the couch. She was wearing a blouse she had ironed for her first day back at school. Her school bag was by the door. She looked like a woman who had somewhere to be and was simply waiting for this to be over, so she could go be useful. Elijah stood. "I need to tell all of you something," he said. "The company is not bankrupt." The room shifted. Victor's hand, which had been reaching for a pastry, stopped midair. Reggie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Camille looked up at him with an expression that traveled through confusion, then recognition, then something harder to name. "The company is in the strongest position it has ever been. I fabricated the bankruptcy to see what the people closest to me would do when they believed the money was gone." Silence. Then he pulled out his phone. He opened the file Yvonne had compiled. He read aloud. Victor's phone calls to Reggie, the holding company, the stolen subcontractor relationships, the forged lease with Camille's name. Every detail laid out with the cold precision of a man who has spent a week learning exactly how far the rod extends. Victor stood up. This is being taken completely out of context." Mama Ruth spoke for the first time. "Sit down, Victor." He sat. Reggie said nothing. He placed his pastry on the coffee table very carefully, as though the table might not hold the weight, and folded his hands. Elijah looked at his wife. "Camille, I owe you something first." She shook her head. "Elijah, you do not have to." "Yes, I do." His voice broke on the second word and he let it break. "I know about the hospital contract. I know you went to the director 3 times. I know you spent 4 months reading to sick children so my company would survive. And you never said a word." Her hand came up to her mouth. "I know you applied at Kashmir Gardens this week. I know you were ready to go back to a classroom and earn a teacher's salary so our family could make it through something that was not even real." He stopped. "And I know that 3 years ago, I stopped seeing you. I stopped coming home in any way that mattered. I was here every night, and I was gone every night, and you carried this family by yourself while I convinced myself that building something was the same as being present for someone." Camille was crying. Quietly, without performance, the tears of a woman who has been carrying a weight so long she forgot what it felt like to set it down. "I found the resignation letter," she said. The room went still. "Last year, in your desk drawer. You wrote a letter resigning from your own company. Dated March. You never sent it." Elijah stared at her. "You were going to walk away from everything because you were that unhappy, and you did not tell me. So I decided that if you would not talk to me, I would make sure that whatever you decided, the ground beneath us would hold." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "That is why I went to the hospital director. That is why I never stopped looking for ways to protect what we had. Not the money, Elijah. You. I was trying to protect you." What is occurring between Elijah and Camille is what couples therapists call a mutual unmasking. Both have been carrying secret burdens designed to protect the other, and both have been suffering in isolation as a result. The resignation letter reveals that Elijah's crisis predates the experiment by over a year. He was already questioning the value of his achievements. Camille's response, to quietly fortify the foundation without confrontation, is characteristic of what psychologists term protective silence. She chose stability over honesty because she believed his breaking point was closer than he knew. The tragedy is that both were right about the other's pain and wrong about the solution. Hiding did not protect either of them. It only made the distance wider. If you've ever been in a marriage where both people are hurting and neither one is talking, drop a word in the comments. Just one word that describes what that silence felt like. And if this story is hitting close to home, stay with it, because what happened next changed this family in a way that none of them were prepared for. Elijah turned to Victor. "You put my wife's name on a fraudulent lease. Your own sister. If that company had been investigated, she would have been the one facing charges." Victor opened his mouth. "Do not," Mama Ruth said from the armchair. She had not raised her voice. She had not needed to. There is a particular authority that belongs to a woman who has spent 50 years working in the service of other people's children and has no patience left for grown men who behave like ones. She stood, slowly, with the deliberate movement of a woman who wants every person in the room to understand that what she is about to say has been considered carefully. She looked at Victor, then at Reggie. "I pressed school uniforms for 23 years so my son could build something honest. I wore my fingers raw on other people's wrinkles. I did that so he could stand in rooms like this and be proud of how he got here." She paused. "You will not steal from him. You will not use his wife. And you will not sit in the house he built and pretend you are family while you pick his pockets." She turned to Elijah. "And you put this woman through a test she did not deserve. She already passed every test there is. She passed it every morning when she woke up in that kitchen alone and chose to stay." She looked at Camille with the particular tenderness of a mother-in-law who has been watching and approving for a very long time. "Baby, I saw you. Even when he did not. I saw you." Camille pressed her lips together and nodded, the kind of nod that holds back a sound too large for a room. Mama Ruth turned back to Victor and Reggie. "Get out of this house, both of you. And if I hear either of your names attached to anything that belongs to my son or his wife, I will call an attorney and I will enjoy every minute of it." Victor left without looking at his sister. Reggie followed. The pastries stayed on the table. Nobody touched them. Tobias came down from the staircase. He walked to his mother first, then to his father. He put an arm around each of them and stood there, 17 years old and growing into someone neither of them had fully appreciated until this moment. Mama Ruth sat back down in her armchair. She opened her purse, pulled out a peppermint, unwrapped it slowly, and placed it in her mouth. "Now then," she said, "what is for dinner?" 3 months later, in February, Camille was standing in front of a classroom of third graders at Kashmir Gardens Elementary, reading a book about a caterpillar who was afraid to become a butterfly. She had kept the teaching job, not because they needed the money, because she needed the work. Because it was hers, Elijah restructured the company. He removed every subcontractor who had routed invoices through Victor's holding company. He filed a fraud report with the Harris County District Attorney's Office. He hired 2 young contractors from 3rd Ward, both graduates of a trades program his mother had helped fund years earlier, and gave them their first commercial project. He stopped scheduling calls before 8:09 in the morning. He started showing up to Tobias's basketball games with nothing in his hands. No phone, no laptop. Just a man in the bleachers watching his son play, clapping too loudly and not caring who heard. Tobias averaged 14 points a game that season. He told his English teacher his father was his hero, not because of the company, because he finally came to the games. On a Saturday evening in March, Elijah took Camille to the restaurant where they had their first date. A small Creole place on Alameda Road that had changed owners twice, but still had the same red vinyl booths and the same Christmas lights strung across the ceiling year-round. They sat across from each other. He reached into his jacket and placed a small box on the table. Inside was a ring, not the diamond she already wore. A simple gold band engraved on the inside with 5 words, "I see you now, always." She held it up to the Christmas lights and read the inscription. Her eyes filled and she laughed, the way people laugh when something is too full to hold in any other way. "You know what I was most afraid of," she said. "Not losing the money, not the house. I was afraid you would never come back, that you would just keep building and building until there was nothing left of you to come home to." He took her hand across the table. "I am here," he said. "I know I was not, but I am here now, and I am going to keep being here. That is the only thing I want to build from now on." She slid the ring onto her finger. It sat beside the diamond, gold next to glitter, the quiet promise next to the expensive one. They walked to the truck afterward. The March air was warm for Houston, carrying Jasmine from somewhere down the block. She leaned against him in the parking lot, and he held her there for a long time. Under a streetlight that buzzed softly, and the distant hum of the freeway, and the sound of a city that keeps moving, whether you are paying attention or not. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He almost did not look, almost let the moment stay whole, but something in the pattern of the vibration, a long pause followed by 2 short pulses, made him reach for it. Unknown number, no name saved, 1 message. "You think the hospital contract was the only thing Camille hid from you? Ask her about the year before Tobias was born. Ask her what the doctors told her and what she chose to do alone. Then ask yourself if you ever truly knew the woman sleeping next to you." Camille was smiling at something across the street. A couple arguing cheerfully over which direction to walk, their laughter floating across the parking lot. Elijah looked at the message. Then he looked at his wife. Then he closed the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He smiled. But behind his eyes, quiet as a held breath, and steady as the hum of a streetlight that never quite goes dark, something shifted. Not fear, not suspicion. The slow, certain recognition that the woman beside him had been carrying more than he knew, more than he had ever thought to ask about. And that some truths, the ones that matter most, the ones that reshape everything, do not arrive when you go looking for them. They arrive when you are finally still enough to hear what has been there all along. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It is not grand. It only hopes to gently touch your heart. That even when looked down upon or pushed aside, justice may arrive late, but never absent, and kindness will ultimately be rewarded in the most beautiful way. Production team, story and screenplay by Quinn Fung. Character development and visual conceptualization by Chris Nguyen. Video scripting and scene adaptation by David Nguyen. A passionate team dedicated to bringing this story to life.